The FBI is now investigating Donald Trump's crackhead comment, or at least some of the consequences of that comment, according to them. Every time Trump says something, the usual suspects in the media, they all come out and say, oh my gosh, he's inciting violence. There's going to be murders and everybody's going to die because Trump posted a Truth Social. Well, we've already covered what the post was in relation to. But remember Jack Smith, the special counsel? He is prosecuting Trump, and there was a neat little incident where there was a dime bag of cocaine discovered at the White House. And so Trump has some fun with this. He posts on Truth Social. He said, does anybody really believe that the cocaine found in the West Wing of the White House, very close to the Oval Office, which they lied about where it was, by the way, is for the use of anyone other than Hunter and Joe Biden? But watch, the fake news media will start soon saying that the amount found was, quote, very small, and it wasn't really cocaine, but rather some common ground up aspirin, and the story will vanish. Has deranged Jack Smith, the special counsel, the crazy Trump-hating prosecutor, been seen in the area of the cocaine? He looks like a crackhead to me. And so that's a very colorful statement from Donald Trump, and that agitated a bunch of people. We saw other clips from Jake Tapper and Chris Christie. They were hyperventilating over this. Jake Tapper, can they arrest him kind of for this? Can they ban him from Truth Social or something? Is there anything that can be done, is what he was asking. And Christie said, no, not really. I mean, in general, it's not a good idea to call your prosecutor a crackhead. It's not a good strategy in general. For people who are not running for president named Trump, if you're being prosecuted with a crime, consult your attorney before calling the prosecutor names or crackhead. It's just generally a good thing to do. But that being said, this is not the ordinary course of events. We are in a new type of criminality. We have the first time ever in American history. We're living through historical times, my friends, where we have a prosecutor prosecuting on behalf of the power in charge, Joe Biden, his political opponent in America. First time ever it's happened, and here we are. So Trump is playing in two arenas, the court of law and the court of public opinion. And when he makes comments like that, people lose their minds. Here is what the Washington Post says. Prosecutors in Trump classified documents case are facing threats. Woo! FBI says now it's working with partner agencies to assess and respond to threats as the prosecution moves forward. And they really get agitated about this stuff. And let's see if we can fix what's happening here. They say individual prosecutors involved in the classified documents case are facing substantial harassment and threats online and elsewhere. Now, we've been pretty hard on these people. We've been calling out their ethical problems, their conflicts of interest. And, we didn't point out that maybe there is a possibility that they are crackheads. I mean, we don't know where their whereabouts were in the White House. And we also know that Chris Christie even told Jake Tapper that crackheads come in many different shapes and sizes. And we don't know exactly what they look like. So Chris Christie's a longtime prosecutor. He's got a lot of experience in this. So we're just trusting him at his word. So they have not proven that in a court of law, to my knowledge, they have not proven in a court of law that Jack Smith is not a crackhead. And at this stage, there has been found to have been illegal drugs called cocaine in the executive branch, which is what governs the DOJ. So they're going to have to support that one. But now they're facing extremism threats. And who is saying this? I wonder where this is coming from. Oh, look, extremism experts. They're going to be the ones who are sure about this. And a government official who's familiar with the matter. Wow. All right. Well, case closed, everybody. Pretty much official. Donald Trump's responsible for online substantial harassment of Jack Smith because a government official familiar. Now, at the same time, two officials said federal agencies have not observed a general increase in threats against law enforcement in recent weeks, but there's a surge of violent rhetoric in the days after FBI agents searched and raided his home. The officials here spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive security issues. The FBI has called threats against law enforcement reprehensible and dangerous. Yeah, I agree. I think all threats against law enforcement are ill-advised and illegal. You should not be threatening anybody ever, really. I mean, you really shouldn't be threatening people, right? It is illegal in almost most contexts to make a volitional threat. So be very careful about it, especially with law enforcement. If you accidentally open a door and a strong breeze brushes past a law enforcement FBI agent, felony assault, arrest him. So be very cautious about it. But that's not what we're talking about, okay? They do this bait and switch thing. They say, we're receiving threats against law enforcement. Are you sure they're really threats, or are they just people asking questions about why Jay Bratt, a prosecutor with the DOJ, may have improperly threatened Walt Nauda's lawyer during an interview when he was trying to turn his client? Maybe that's the thing that we're talking about. Maybe we're talking about weird relationships between Louis Frey and the Biden crime family, and Louis Frey used to work at the FBI, and he employed one of the prosecutors, David, on the case. Is that the type of conversation you're talking about? Because we know know other incidents that involve the FBI investigating criminality in this country are nuts. They're not legitimate at all. They were creating threats in the Governor Whitmer plot. They were manufacturing threats in the Proud Boys trial. These were people in many of these instances that were talking trash to each other in text message and telegram groups that they metamorphed into an insurrection. So we already know they put pressure on big tech, and now they're going to be using these statements to go after other people. Now, they're referring to experts in political extremism. Amazing. I wonder who these people are. Highly credentialed experts in extremism. They say organized threats of violence against government institutions are generally down since January 6th. Well, I mean, the FBI is probably taking a break. They have to catch their breath again before they start back up before the next election. Then they'll be back up again. So in part because people have realized they could face legal consequences. Now, still, experts say they frequently observe violent rhetoric targeting people who are blamed for undermining the former president. Far-right Trump supporters are posting names of prosecutors and government workers online. They're already online. They're part of public filings. They're in every single document that we are covering here. They're in literally like public record and in news articles. So you see what they're trying to do is smear and castigate all even coverage of these people. Now, again, nobody wants them threatened and nobody even wants them doxxed. I don't endorse any of that, but we're allowed to have conversations about these people and their professional involvement and ethical conflicts. At the Justice Department, officials have responded by trying to look, this is what's going to happen. They're going to try to keep the names of the prosecutors and the agents working on the Trump cases from becoming public. All right. They're going to cover up their fake illegal prosecution that they have created in order to remove a political opponent. They want to keep the names silent and the agents silent. They want everything under seal so we can't even see who the investigators are. We want to watch the watchers. We want to watch the people who are doing the investigations, but they have corrupt influences. We're already seeing the relationships between David and Louis Frey and others like Jay Bratt, and we're starting to piece together this disgusting affair. So they've got to shut everybody up and silence the names from even coming out lest we connect the dots. They don't want them public. They don't want them involved in congressional hearings, and they want less formal conversations about the case. Stop talking about it. You can only hear what we leak to the Washington Post or the New York Times. Now, they say that's a tricky task given the prosecutors' names are listed in public court filings. No kidding. And their names and information about witnesses are accessible to Trump as a defendant for now. I mean, and barely. Trump also has a limitation, a protective order on this case. So he can't even take his notes about the police report home with him. And I didn't say he can't take the police report home with him. He can't take his notes about the police report home with him. He's got to leave that back in his attorney's office. Insane. Because it's Trump and it's classified documents and all the things. Now, they're saying the former president has written social media posts directly attacking people investigating him, including Jack Smith, by calling him a crackhead and other things. So is Trump allowed to criticize now? Do you want to silence his free speech too? You want to shut him up and gag orders so that he can't respond to this? Only Jack Smith, with the power of the media, can talk about the case. Jack Smith won't ever come out and actually communicate anything to the public, but he'll just have his underlings at the DOJ leak, dump all this stuff out into the public, and then they'll craft the narrative. What do you think the Washington Post is doing right now? And they're warning people, don't talk badly about Jack Smith. Don't criticize our prosecutors. Don't put these documents on the screen. Don't share their names. Don't imply that they might be corrupt, lest there be consequences for you. The DOJ and the FBI have also faced criticism from some Republican members of Congress who are demanding accountability, and they decry these investigations as partisan. No kidding. So you see, it's pretty disgusting what they're trying to do. And when we dig into it, we know that they're driving this home. And I think, my friends, I keep saying this, and I know it sounds insane, but remember that when Donald Trump gets indicted for the January 6th stuff, they're going to say he's going to do this again. They're going to say he's running for office again, he's going to lose again, and he's going to contest the election again, and he's going to insurrect again. And he's got no trust or faith in the judicial process or the court of law. He's criticizing everybody. He's criticizing judges and prosecutors. And the only thing that we can do to protect the safety of America is to keep him in custody or to severely limit his accessibility to the documents or to his defense or to his travel. And then you wake up one day and we have the same situation that's happening in Brazil, where their courts, their government just says, well, we don't really like this candidate, so you're not running anymore. The Democrats tell us this is all what we expect in a democracy, an enlightened democracy, while they're trying to imprison and silence everybody who challenges them.
Prosecutors are getting threats around this case as well, Barb. The Washington Post reports some of the prosecutors involved in this classified documents case against former President Trump are facing harassment, threats online and elsewhere, according to extremism experts and a government official familiar with the matter talking to the Post. The FBI says it is working with partner agencies to assess and respond to the threats as the classified documents case moves forward. DOJ officials have also responded by trying to keep the names of prosecutors and agents working on the Trump cases from becoming public in official documents, congressional hearings, and even in less formal conversations about the case. Two officials tell the Post federal agencies have not observed a general increase in threats against law enforcement overall in the weeks since Trump was indicted. That is a major contrast from a surge of reported violent rhetoric against FBI agents in the days following the search of Mar-a-Lago last August. So, Barb, as a former prosecutor yourself, how common is this stuff? How seriously do you take it? And obviously, this all comes from the top. Donald Trump calling into question everything about this case, saying it's a witch hunt, painting himself as a martyr. How did you, as a prosecutor, handle this, and how does DOJ handle it now?
This is not normal. From time to time, prosecutors do get death threats. It may be based on someone that they're prosecuting, but I think we've reached a whole different era when we're sort of crowdsourcing these sort of threats. Anytime former President Donald Trump says these things about witch hunts and hoaxes, calling for the defunding of DOJ.
Witch hunts and hoaxes, calling for the defunding of DOJ, which is a perfectly legitimate policy position, by the way. Not a bad idea. Same thing with the FBI, CIA, and others.
There is the risk that someone out there is going to hear that and take matters into their own hands and go after these career prosecutors. I've had threats. Others have had threats. The way it's usually handled is the U.S. Marshal Service can provide protection.
I don't have that.
Sometimes including 24/7 protection. But
yeah. Defense attorneys don't get that, right? People who aren't a part of the government Gestapo, they don't get that. We get threats all the time. Not a big deal, though, because it's just par for the course. It comes with the territory. But they will charge you with a felony. In many places, even a small threat, even a text message, even a voicemail, even anything that's not serious. You can make a phone call or a text when you're drunk and send a message to a government official. It'll be a gigantic problem for you. They'll raid your house and take it extremely seriously. But you do that to a defense attorney, it's like, come on, did anybody show up with a gun? No? All right, you're fine then. So these people are giant babies. They just cry all the time. Donald Trump posts a mean truth, like, oh, we're all gonna die. Why? Did somebody cut you off on the way home? Give me a break. Put your grocery cart back, all right? The fact that somebody told you to do that doesn't mean that you got harassed, all right? Nobody's gonna murder you in the grocery store.
It's very resource intensive. Prosecutors have better things to do than to be checking in with their security detail. And
like
they
prosecuting
have lives. They have
J6ers.
Children. They have errands to do in their personal lives. And so
so do all the defendants of your fake prosecutions.
This is a whole new day that if prosecutors have to think twice about whether they can just do their job safely.
It's so hard for the prosecutors, man. Life's so hard. And I want to reiterate, I want to be 100%, 1,000,000% clear. It is not a good idea to threaten anybody, really, for any reason at all. In any way, shape, or form. Threatening is just not a good thing in general. Very calm communication about, hey, we seem to have a breakdown here. It feels like we have a little bit of a disagreement, and hopefully we can rectify this, is a better approach. Because any type of threat can be perceived problematically, and it turns into a big deal. But this is not about threats, which everybody disavows. We all disavow threats, but it's always about chilling speech, and it's always about, you can see her frowny face, it's an end of an era, it's a new era in America when Trump is leading this. And you can just see where this is going. It's going to lead into more gag orders, more threats, more circular, around and around we go, the same story, just different seasons. As the J6 investigation continues on, who else is involved in the case? We've got, this one is about Kelli Ward. And yesterday on the show, we talked about Speaker Rusty Bowers, who was interviewed, and he gave us a long, detailed interview. He sort of broke news with Caitlin Collins on CNN, and he explained that he was interviewed by Jack Smith for 4 hours in his office, and he gave him all sorts of details and walked through a bunch of different pieces of the conversation that they had together. We also know that Arizona also has Kelli Ward, and she was also involved, evidently. So we know that NBC News is reporting that Jack Smith subpoenaed the Secretary of State. Adrian Fontes, who is our current Secretary of State, said that Jack Smith wanted information about a pair of lawsuits that were brought. One of them was filed by former President Donald Trump's campaign. Trump filed a lawsuit here, and we covered a whole boatload of these lawsuits. I can't keep track of them at the moment, but we were covering them in different states. Another one was filed by Arizona Republican Party Chair Kelli Ward. So these were actual lawsuits that were filed, and they were claiming that they had evidence and that they needed to stop the certification and recount and set hearings to conduct signature checks and all of the things. And so Trump filed a lawsuit here. Kelli Ward filed another lawsuit. Jack Smith is sending subpoenas to everybody involved. Ward's lawsuit claimed that there were errors and fraud that it tainted 2020. So So Jack Smith sent in a subpoena. He wanted documents related to communications with opposing attorneys, discovery, proposed exhibits. The subpoena was issued as recently as May. He said that another law firm representing the Secretary of State complied with his request, and another attorney declined to comment. Rusty Bowers, as we heard from, said that there's not much more he wants to talk about. And so our question, of course, is what are these people talking about? And are they going to reappear as witnesses in a trial? Because the election debate in 2020 was very extensive. Florida, by comparison, was just a simple one location, boxes, a set of documents, and that was the end of the story. But the extent to which there were different states and different people, different lawsuits filed was big. One party who was highly involved in all of this was Trump's vice president, Mike Pence. And there has been this battle going on behind the scenes about whether Mike Pence and his testimony can be used against Donald Trump. We know that Mike Pence has already been called in front of the special counsel and been asked to testify. He said he has testified, but Mike Pence was Donald Trump's vice president. And so we have this thing called executive privilege. And executive privilege is a concept that's supposed to protect people in the executive agency from being under threat all the time of revealing their conversations. And the reason we want that is so that we have some candor, so that we can have people in office speaking frankly with one another, communicating openly without having to carefully craft their words for fear of being under court order or congressional subpoena or something. And that is a very powerful privilege. It's supposed to be similar to an attorney-client privilege. And we want to protect the sanctity of that relationship. Well, none of those privileges matter if your name is Donald Trump. They just throw them right into the garbage along with the rest of the Constitution. And they say that Mike Pence and Donald Trump, their relationship was one in which Trump was asking Pence to commit further crimes. And so that breaches the executive privilege because you can't ask for protection to cover and immunize you and create a force field around criminality. So this has been an appeal that's been going on for some time. Mike Pence has already testified. Trump's team has been really working to preclude that testimony to keep it out. And we know that those efforts today failed. Trump's lingering appeal over Pence's January 6th testimony has been dismissed. Pence appeared before a special grand jury last wanted to preclude that testimony. But a federal appeals court tossed out what remained of Donald Trump's unsuccessful legal fight to stop former vice president turned rival now, Mike Pence, from testifying about the efforts to overturn 2020. Now you can see this is a major conflict of interest here. Pence has absolute inside knowledge, sort of like a scorned lover, so to speak. They were in a very serious relationship. They got a divorce. Mike Pence is now running for the position that Donald Trump is running from. So he may have said a bunch of stuff that might have been self-serving to him and disadvantageous to Trump. A panel from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit issued a sealed order. And that's why we can't follow this stuff. Everything is sealed. We can't see it. What are the arguments? What's the DOJ saying? What are Trump's lawyers saying? This is the prosecution of a former president and the #1 leader currently in the Republican Party. What kind of democracy, what kind of judicial system is this where we're supposed to have accountability and transparency? And we can't even see what these arguments are about why they're going to breach executive privilege between Trump and the vice president, both of whom were elected by the people of America. It's bizarro land. They won't show us anything. And all of this is still sealed. Coming out of the DC circuit, all right? They're going to try to bury this stuff as deep as they possibly can. They don't want you to even know anything about the prosecutors or the executive privilege or the attorney-client privilege. Maybe they're not even going to tell us about the trial. We'll just wake up, we'll fast forward 2 weeks, Donald Trump will be in prison. They'll say, no, sorry, guilty. They'll go, what? Sorry. Joe Biden's your president again for 4 years. Eat it. The parties aren't named in the public docket, but Bloomberg previously confirmed the information about the litigation. We know that Pence testified before a grand jury in Washington in late April in the federal probe run by Jack Smith. Trump had failed to convince the D.C. court to stop it while they maintained executive privilege, challenged the subpoena. Trump didn't win in the initial order. All the briefs are sealed. We can't see anything. But the public docket shows that after Pence appeared, the government asked the court to dismiss. Pence separately challenged the subpoena, so he fought it as well, but he didn't pursue an appeal. Judge Boasberg, as we read through in this filing recently, crapped all over executive privilege, and Trump's office did not comment. So Mike Pence has a very powerful position here. A defendant in a criminal investigation, you're concerned about what Mike Pence is saying, okay, because he has access. He's got insider access. He's in the White House while all this happened. And he was the guy that they were relying on as the Keystone Man. He was the decision man. He was going to go in there on that day, on January 6th, the fateful day, and make a decision. And so he's going to be one of the key witnesses in this case. And strangely, he's running against Donald Trump. What a weird coincidence that he might have a conflict like that. Pence gets asked about January 6th. Here's what he says.
You were commenting on the fact that all of these problems belong to Joe Biden. And they do. However, if it wasn't for your vote, we would not have Joe Biden in the White House.
Right.
Joe Biden shouldn't be there. And all those wonderful things that you and Trump were doing together would be continuing, and this country would be on the right path. You ever second guess yourself? That was a constitutional right that you had to send those votes back to the states. It was not like you were going to personally elect him. We all know by the number of votes that were there who won that election.
Well, let me speak to that issue.
History for this country.
Yeah, let me speak to the issue, because I think it's an issue that continues to be misunderstood, but I know by God's grace I did exactly what the Constitution of the United States required of me that day. And I kept my oath. But let me be very respectful of the question and tell you, look, states conduct our elections. You never want to let Washington, D.C. run elections. You certainly would never want one person in Washington, D.C. to decide who the President of the United States is going to be.
I don't think that's what she said, though. Yeah, that's not.
Ma'am, let me explain.
Yeah, so somebody else over here says that's not what she said, though, buddy boy. He said send it back to the states.
It to you. States conduct elections. Iowa, where I live in Indiana, and after there were questions in a half a dozen or so states, we had reviews of the results, 60 different lawsuits that went to the courts. Where there are questions, there's two ways that they're reviewed. Number one is you take those issues to the legal process in the state for recounts. Secondly, you take them to the courts, which we did very aggressively. Now, there were voting irregularities that took place. You had a half a dozen states that changed the rules in the name of COVID.
Yeah, we covered all those. Those were major changes. And those changes, arguably, were unconstitutional because they were done by the courts and they were done by the secretaries of state, not by the legislatures. The legislatures govern elections, not judges who say, oh, my COVID, oh. Or the election SOSs, secretaries of states who say we have urgency emergencies. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot. We waive signature requirements. You get extra days to vote. All of that was pending. And so when that constitutional framework gets usurped, that's why people have problems with it. And that's what they were asking for.
Held those changes in virtually every instance, and in every instance where they would have had any impact whatsoever. At the end of the day, when Iowa certified your results and sent them to Washington, D.C., when Indiana certified our results, the Constitution of the United States in Article 2 says the job of the Vice President is to serve as the presiding officer of a joint session where you open and count the votes. Don't take my word for it. Go read the Constitution. Not really. I say this with great affection and respect. The Constitution is very clear. My job was to oversee a session of Congress where objections could be heard, and I made sure that objections would be recognized. So we would hear whatever evidence or whether debate there was, but the Constitution says you open and count the votes, no more, no less. The Constitution affords no authority for the Vice President or anyone else to reject votes or return votes to the states. Never been done before, should never be done in the future.
It had never been done.
That's actually what the Constitution says. No vice president in American history ever asserted the authority that you have been convinced that I had.
Okay, so now I actually think that you can read the text that way. You can read it the other way. In other words, there is ambiguity there, which is why he defaults back to the nobody has ever done it that way before. Now, we know that when we spent a lot of time on this, we pulled up the Congressional Research Service documents. We read through this with a fine-tooth comb, and we played both sides of the argument, and we said, can Pence do this? Can he not do it? And he went with the standard precedent and the standard protocol. But that doesn't mean that he had to do it that way. And there is ambiguity there. That's why Congress is talking about reforming that provision. I mean, they're actually talking about modifying the Electoral Count Act because it is confusing and because you can make arguments like that. And so what my point is that making that argument, asking Mike Pence to do that, is not illegal. He could have theoretically done it the other way. It may have been ill-advised. It may have been something you disagree with. It may have been something that is, has never been done before. Wow, it's never been done before. You mean like prosecuting a president? Yeah. So they can break precedent, but Pence can't. But my point is, there's stuff that happens in this country that has never been done before. That alone doesn't make it illegal. That doesn't make it something that Mike Pence is prohibited from doing. He just didn't do it. He's trying to defer away his his capability to immunize himself from the responsibility of having to make a decision. He said, no, I have no ability to do that. And I understand how you could read it that way, but Trump didn't read it that way. And the fact that he asked Pence to do it is not a crime. Jack Smith, I fully believe, is going to disagree with that and charge accordingly.
But I want to tell you, with all due respect, I said before, I said when I announced, President Trump was wrong about my authority that day, and he's still wrong. I believe it with all my heart.
Not much applause on that one.
That being said, I am encouraged by the fact that states around the country have been passing changes in election laws at the state level that are protecting the integrity of the vote. I frankly think we ought to have voter ID in every state in this country. I really do. But at the end of the day, I will also say to you that while I believe by God's grace that I did my duty that day, I do, no second guessing. I really think that this election has got to be about the future.
That's rough.
If we spend the next election talking about the past, you're going to get 4 more years of Democrats in the White House.
All right, so you get the point. That's Mike Pence. So here is Donald Trump. He explains what a corrupt joke this is. Everything from top to bottom. The DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, they're all covering up Joe Biden's crimes. Now you've got the Secret Service involved and most of the media. And we've got tons of evidence that the Biden crime family is involved in nefarious activities all throughout the globe. Meanwhile, they're prosecuting Trump.
We have a corrupt media. No, think of it. They have absolute proof that Biden's being paid off by China, Ukraine, and many other countries. And the press doesn't even write about it. That would have been 10 years ago. That would have been the biggest story in history. It's 100 times bigger than Watergate. That would have been the biggest, and they don't even put it on the news. They don't. You look, if there's anything, they feel guilty because they have the biggest story in history, and they are cowards. They're corrupt.
They are corrupt. They won't even talk about it. They're trying to censor everybody, and they are using DOJ to prosecute their political enemies. And even when Trump posts a truth, we now know that that is going to activate all of those keyboard Waldo searching warriors at the FBI.